Steering wheel, somebody tell him to give it to me.
There's something loose between my legs.
I don't know. Let go!
I'm heavier than a freaking boat.
Nothing you can say can make that any better.
Yeah, nobody. No more radio for the rest of the race.
I'm going home.
Hello and welcome to DRSFC, an F1 podcast by soccer nerds. I'm a soccer nerd. I am Donald. I have Ebony with me, another fellow soccer nerd, my main homie. Ebony, how's it going?
Oh, chilling. Just watched the sad USA game. So let's talk about Mexico.
I watched the same game, and as we are soccer nerds, we will actually not talk about the soccer part tonight. This is a bit. Congrats to Portugal, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna talk about Mexico City because we go to honestly, Mexico City is maybe not my favorite track, but it has the favorite component or favorite part of a track for me on this grid. The Mexico City Grand Prix is this weekend. Of course, in Mexico City at the Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez. And first of all, let's get into some of the track specifics. The length of it, 4.304 kilometers or 2.67 miles. They will be doing 71 laps on Sunday, and the race lap record is 1:17.74 seconds. That set in 2021 by Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes. So first of all, Ebony, I want to get into some of the track specifics because first of all, what do you like about this track? I'll start with the fact that there are 3 DRS zones, but there are only 2 detection zones. So if you get to zone 2, detection zone 2, you can ride that for 2 DRS zones, which are 2 of the longer stretches in the entire circuit.
Yeah. I love this stadium because it's so high up. We were talking about it before, the altitude. It's gonna leave you breathless just how high above sea level it is. But I think it's gonna make for some very interesting racing, especially with like temperatures and all that stuff. So that's one of my favorite parts about this track.
So I'll talk about my favorite again. I think it's my favorite portion of any track on this circuit, and that is La Peraltada.
Oh yeah.
The fact that this turn 14, you turn into an entire baseball stadium where 40,000 people are screaming. Every time they go through that wall, drivers comment on the fact that how loud it is and how it makes their skin just like tingle with all the passionate fans that are down there in Mexico City. That's easily for me one of the favorite parts of F1 because it's something where they said, hey, we need to make this track and we need to make it go around here, but there's this baseball stadium in the way. And someone said, fuck it, let's go through the baseball stadium. We don't need the baseball part anymore. And so they did. And so the fact that they were able to take that and kind of use it in redoing this track and creating one of the great spectacles of Formula One, I think is awesome.
We talked about a lot of what we like. One of the things that I don't like about this track is how this track helped with the downfall of Checo.
His home race. It was his home race. And, we will get to see
bad.
him back on the grid next year. So he will have another crack at Mexico City. I'm sure they're going to be wild when he shows up in the Cadillac.
I hope that he shows up this weekend. Cadillac does like something crazy to like and reintroduce him back to the people and to the circuit. That would be dope for them to just like go all out for his home race, especially as their first driver. So that's the one thing I don't like about this track. I know we have the Checo Perez award.
Well, we retired it. It's now the Lance Stroll Memorial.
True.
Gloomy boy.
But it was really sad just because it went from Austin to Mexico, and he was already clearly was not having a fun time at Red Bull at that point, and he immediately just crashes out. Like what, lap 1 or 2?
Yeah, I think it was.
Didn't
I
even
think it
get
was like
that
the
far?
first. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think he made it to the baseball stadium. But also you have him, right? He's coming back to Cadillac. Bottas, I mentioned, has the fastest lap ever at this track, and he's the reserve driver for Mercedes. I don't think they're doing this, but if I'm Cadillac, I'm maybe calling up Mercedes saying, hey, look, can he get an FP1, FP2 up in there in the car? only because, again, with both of them at Cadillac, I'm sure Cadillac would love nothing more than to have their fans at Mexico City, trying to essentially try to treat that as a secondary home track for Cadillac, the United States tracks, but also this one. You want them to kind of get used to Bottas in that second car too.
Oh, but you know what? This is also Liam's return.
Mm, that's true.
And they don't forget. They don't forget.
They,
He
they
might
they
run on the
may
track
have
and splash his tires. Like,
they have been waiting a long time. I wonder what the reception will be like for him. Ebony, we were talking about this before. I want to get into the tire talk, and Diti is not on this episode, unfortunately, so we won't get her expertise on this. But once again, for what seems like the 97th time this year, Pirelli is skipping a compound again in this race. They are doing the C2 for the hard, C4 for the medium, and C5 for the soft. But I don't know if they've done this before, and we've just missed it. But I was trying to find out the question that we ask every time they skip a compound: why? Why the hell would they do this? And so I looked, and they actually have a little bit of an explanation as to what their thought process was behind skipping a compound for this particular race. They did not do that last year. So I'll read a part of it there, and I'll have you react to it. So they says, quote, last year, the soft tire only came into play in qualifying and then in the race, only in an attempt to secure the extra point for settling the fastest race lap. But now the scenario could change considerably. The advantage to be had from the C4 and C5 could in fact lead teams to aim for a race run predominantly run on those compounds. However, that comes with the risk of possibly having to make a second pit stop because of degradation. Anyone choosing the C2 could relatively comfortably manage a longer stint going for a one stop on the way to the checkered flag, although it would entail a reduction in performance, end quote. So I put it to you, is that a good thought process considering what happened in the race last year? And is that, I mean, I feel like skipping a compound doesn't necessarily uh, create any advantages, but it feels like Pirelli is setting up these drivers to make a decision. Do you go conservative and go for the two stop, or do you go for broke essentially and go for the one stop?
see, I think they're overcorrecting. I think this is what happens every time they skip a compound. They're overcorrecting because they did this in a race before, and I remember it because I think Deepti and I talked about it. It's like because there was a race where literally everyone did a one stop because there was no point because the tires lasted so long. They overcorrected and were like, well, we're just gonna give you some of our softest tires, and you have no choice but to do two stops. And then they still only did one stop because the mediums were actually going longer than they expected for all the compounds. So, like, I understand their reasoning, but it's complete bull. They just want to find value in these tires, and wow, you know what they're proving? That Pirellis last a long time.
Right.
So, and that's great, but it makes for a boring race. So if we're
I
not gonna get the McLaren boys crashing into each other every week to give Max the title, we'll talk about that in a second.
mhm.
Then it's a one stops. There's all one stops. Like you could try to force two stops. I think they only forced two stops in one track on the circuit, but other than that, like unless you're just imposing it, it really doesn't matter. Their teams are gonna do one stop.
And I think again, you kind of go for broke on the one stop because it's still 71 laps and maybe a shorter track. There's still 71 laps, of which there again are three DRS zones, two of which are very long straights. One basically right off the checker flag all the way down to turn one, and then from
Yep.
turn three to turn four. So it's interesting because teams are going to probably want to take advantage of that in an effort to not make it where these races that we've seen the last few weeks where, the difference between first and second has been like 20 seconds. And so I feel like using these DRS zones or even these straightaways to try and gain some speed and gain some ground is going to, again, melt these tires in a little faster realm that makes it where going 71 laps with just one stop is not going to work. I don't foresee. Again, I see somebody trying to do it. Now, if I were to ask you who you think would be the one that tries to go for broke on this, there's a lot of people and I'm just talking about kind of the top few guys, and I don't necessarily worry about the bottom of the grid, but in a race between the top guys at the top of the drivers' championship, and even those guys that are kind of in the middle with regards to the constructors, I wonder who decides to go for broken strategy, because we're running out of time here. There's only a few races left after this, and so everyone's trying to get as many points as possible.
Like go for the one stop. I truly only think that the only people that can risk it without any problem is Ferrari. But we
Hmm.
also know that Ferrari does Ferrari things. So um I mean, I could see Oscar trying to just go balls to the wall because he already feels kind of slighted. So you might as well just go for broke, bro. Just take your chances. If they're not going to help you get a championship, then go get one yourself. So take the risks.
I have a question. Did McLaren have a pit stop under 3 seconds last weekend? I don't know that they did.
Well,
And it and if that's
I know
and if that's
Lando at
true,
one point didn't. Lando definitely didn't because it was like, well, he may have like his first one, I think was.
well, that would have
Uh,
been the first one they had all year.
yeah.
Because all of them have been above 3 seconds. And so what I say to that is going for broke, maybe not necessarily going for broke, but just minimizing the opportunities they have to screw this up
Mm.
via the pit stop. So maybe they're like, hey, Oscar's maybe like, let's just do this one time so that I have to worry about this one time. But again, it's all about how they manage their tires. And with these softer compounds, with the medium and soft, it's going to be interesting to see who is able to do that. With the hard tires, I feel like someone can go 50 laps, but still, that's a gamble because they're going to lose some time as the longer they're out there on the track with those tires. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Now, again, Deep T's not here, so she can't tell us what this track looks like. But when I first looked at it, I saw like a really oblong AI creation of a B-2 bomber. Because of
Mhm.
course we're American, we have to think in weapons apparently. But I also thought of like a stingray where somebody tried to draw a stingray from memory and
Oh,
failed.
Stingray hurts. RIP.
Yeah, yeah.
He
They
did a,
they got
to be fair, sidebar, he did a great job on Dancing with the Stars.
oh yeah.
Baby
I,
Irvin,
I
yeah.
I don't watch Dance with the Stars, but I heard he showed himself quite well for someone who apparently can't dance. So which is most of the people on Dancing with the Stars. Holla at me Topanga. I digress. So I
I
think
do see a stingray. If you turn your head just a slight bit,
yeah, you gotta cock your head to the
you
right a little
gotta
bit.
you gotta think
Yeah.
about it in like terms of like what would it look like in the Louvre, and then you gotta
Hmm.
think about what it will look like in the Louvre robberies. And so I'm just I see it. I'm there. Okay.
Would someone steal this track? Yes or no? I say yes.
Yes. Oh, 1,000%. It's abstract enough.
Uh-huh.
Is it a family heirloom that the British stole first?
Possibly. I
Mm,
mean, baseball was there, so
yeah. Hmm.
that's what it is. So yes. So this track has some quirks in it. It looks like a stingray if you cock your head to the side. But I think the best thing is there is a lot of speed in this track. Two DRS, or I'm sorry, two really long DRS zones, and then a third kind of shorter DRS zone with a curve allows you to bank some speed. And it's really about some of these turns that are really crucial, especially turn 13 coming into La Peraltada at turn 14. That's where a lot of people can lose some ground because
You
of
said
again
the turn is important, so that means no Kimmy. Okay, okay.
yeah.
Yeah. That's steer clear. That's no Yuki. Yeah. And one of the Williams is just gonna have to fuck up on that one.
One of the Williams is going to mess it up for everybody. And I think
Mhm.
here's the funny thing is we've seen over the last couple of weeks a bunch of stuff happen on that first lap, whether it be the sprint or the Grand Prix. the fact that they're able to bank a ton of speed off of the line and have almost a little bit over, I think it's a little bit over a kilometer worth
Mhm.
of straight until they get to turn one. And then turn one's basically just a hard right turn. I want to see how chaotic those first couple of turns are, because
It's,
somebody is going to try and make a move on that first straight, and somebody is going to do it, and it's not going to go well.
oh, Stroll. What are we talking about?
Stroll. No, I'm not worried about Stroll because Stroll has to be fast off the line, and he's not that.
Oh, right.
I'm thinking about someone up front who's gonna not necessarily the three guys that we'll probably talk about after the break, but I'm thinking of the guys who are gonna be in that top, 6 or 7, um, like a Mercedes, like a Ferrari, whatever Williams decides they're gonna go faster in qualifying. One of the Saubers who decide to go faster in qualifying, maybe Isaac Hajar. I'm wondering which one of those guys are going to try and cut in and try to go for it on that first turn and cause chaos that maybe takes out somebody that's in that top three.
Mm.
I'm looking at I think we're looking for chaos at this point. If they're gonna have chaos at the top of the standings, then just bring it in turn one. Don't let us wait for it.
Yeah. Don't make me wait till the end of the track. Give me chaos turn two, because I think they play it safe and then they're like, oh, this is an easy turn now. And then it's just all mayhem
Uh-huh.
straight on after doing turn three and going straight. Oh, that's a perfect setup for like Yuki. Not even gonna lie.
Well, let's put a pin on that. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about some of the things to watch in this race, namely the Drivers' Championship. So we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and we turn our attention to the things we want to watch for this weekend. And Ebony and I were talking about this. There's really one thing that maybe has a bunch of layers in it, but there's one thing that is for certain. We have a Drivers' Championship race.
Hmm.
Oscar Piastri right now, just to update standings, Oscar Piastri is sitting in first with 346 points. Right behind him, his teammate Lando Norris with 332, and nipping at both of their heels is Max Verstappen with 306 points. And even if you go down to fourth, George Russell is sitting in fourth with 252 points, which is a little bit higher than where Verstappen was 2 weeks ago. And now Verstappen has inserted himself into this race. So the thing that I look at is we now have a situation where it's Max versus McLaren. And one of the layers that now presents itself is something that we've seen the last few years because Max was in first, is that basically the entire Red Bull family, cousins, uncles, and everybody was basically told, hey, Max is going for this championship. We need to do everything to help him out. And that was Red Bull, the second seat at Red Bull, that was both Racing Bulls. And now Max is at a point where he's trying to catch up. And to do that, he is going to need help from people ahead of him and even people behind him. And as we get down to the final few races, my thought is this the race that we see all of Red Bull become involved in the Drivers' Championship to, again, try to put on their softs and try and get the fastest lap to be just ahead of the McLarens, to just push them a little bit further down the grid so that they can spend as much time on the track during the Grand Prix as possible, holding them back. Yeah, sure. Isaac Hajar, if he gets into fourth in qualifying, which he's done, right? He's started a little bit pretty high up in the grid in a couple of these races. If he's ahead of a McLaren, his orders are probably going to be do everything you can to make sure that McLaren doesn't pass you as long as possible. Hold them off as long as you can to give Max, who may be ahead of you, some ground to build up a lead of 30 seconds. And that's what I'm thinking might be the wild card that once again re-enters the conversation, because McLaren is not going to help each other out. They're both going for the title. So they're not going to help each other out. But Max has three other drivers that in theory Red Bull could utilize to help him along the way. And then now you're going to have the Hatfields and McCoys, and you have the rest of the grid kind of going, okay, whose side am I on? Like if push comes to shove, if I have to help one of these drivers, which one's it going to be? Is it going to be one of the McLarens or is it going to be Max? And
Well, considering that
Yeah.
Lando's been a dick to people all season, they're gonna go fucking either Oscar or Max, and because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So,
But for the last, what, 4.5 years, Max has been the dick. So
right.
now they're like, okay, that's left with Oscar. But then, you know, Oscar's been shooting himself in the foot as well. So I think that has become the biggest storyline, and it shouldn't have been. We were talking in the chat. I think this is, if McLaren bottles this, it will be an all-time generational collapse. One that they will talk about in one of the greatest collapses in all of sports, where they talk about, Van de Velde in the British Open. They talk about, unfortunately, my Tigers and being 15 games up in the division and losing it. Like those sort of things, they're gonna say, oh, the McLarens had the Warriors had a 3-1 lead in the finals. This is going to be one of those things, 28-3. They're going to look at this and say McLaren had a 200-point lead almost with like 8 races left and lost the thing. And they can't do that. But the problem is they got to figure out how to benefit each other while also benefiting themselves.
Mm. Well, you mentioned the three other drivers helping Max. That stuck with me because I've seen on the online reports that this is the race where they determine what's going to happen with Yuki for 2026. And if he does he fall in line and even then he doesn't race well, does that mean he's out of a seat? Or does he pull a Colapinto? And then
Mm.
I'm gonna race for my seat next year somewhere because in theory there's potentially a baby bull spot open. There's one Alpine spot open. We don't know what's happening with Sauber. There's technically has the Williams resigned?
Yeah, they're both signed for next year. Yeah.
Okay. So then that spot's open, and then obviously the one he's currently in, he's got a chance to fight for something.
I'm glad you mentioned Colapinto because it brings up again two little quirky things um that happened last week that are now going to exacerbate this week. One is, he decided to go against team rules and take the lead over his teammate Pierre Gasly with like what, a lap left,
Yeah,
and they had a
so
I guess they had
stupid.
I guess they had a strong talking to after the game or after the match, and they said, you know what, we're not doing that again, and he had to come out and do the whole apology tour of I skirted team rules and that's my bad. The other thing that happened is the the crash that happened in the sprint that took out both McLarens
Hmm.
was ruled to be by McLaren to be Oscar's fault. So whatever repercussions that were in theory in place for Lando Norris are now off the table. They have been neutralized by Oscar causing a crash in the sprint race. We still don't know what those repercussions ever were, but again, this to me, this feels like another chance for McLaren just to be like, this was our guy, and I know we had to punish him, air quotes, but now Oscar has given us a chance to say, okay, we're back to, air quotes, square, and these guys can race free. But I think everyone knows what that means. That means, again, Lando is going to get some of this preferential treatment from Zach Brown, even if he's saying the right things. We see what they're doing, and what they're doing is giving Lando preferential treatment.
The which also pisses me off because if you're like, I went on this very bad rant about how Zach Brown pissed me off because he said it wasn't his guy's fault, and I'm like, no, actually it was all their fault. And you went after Nico, like Nico had the opportunity to see Oscar or avoid Oscar. There's this level of arrogance surrounding all of McLaren right now because they've been dominant for 2 years, but they don't know what the fuck to do with it. So now, now the drivers are whining. Zach Brown looks like an idiot, all while winning a constructors championship. But you're going to crash out. Your drivers are going to crash out. and Max is gonna win another championship because you don't know how to just call a spade and call Lando your number one. I don't even. I think we talked about this on a pre. Well, we did talk about this on a previous episode. I don't think Lando wants to be number one.
Well, that's the thing. I think it all goes back to last year to me, when at the end of the season, when they had clinched the constructors championship, Lando immediately went on international linear TV and said, "I'm going to be the drivers' champion next year." And they were like, "You sure you want to say that?" He's like, "I'm confident that I'm going to be the guy." And when they asked Zach Brown about it, he was like, "I'm confident in my buddy and my boy Lando to back up what he says next year." Knowing that Oscar Piastri was sitting right there going, "Yo, I'm going to factor into this thing too." And the entire year, we've talked about it, the entire year, every time there has been a papaya rules situation, Lando has been the benefit of those papaya rules. Now, even with him trying to crash, trying to, make a move and crashing into Oscar, they said repercussions were had, but they didn't say anything about what those repercussions were. Like, we don't know if he had to do the dishes after dinner. We don't know if he had to run an extra lap around the track before a race. We don't know if he had any other, punishments, but they were neutralized in like 3 days because Oscar, was deemed to have created a crash, and now everyone's back square. But it's not square again. Like, the only opportunity Oscar, I feel, had for McLaren to have his back was with these repercussions in place. Now they're gone. So all square means Lando's still in the driver's seat. And Oscar, the fact that he's kind of racing the worst that he's raced all year at this point, I feel like is getting to him. And it needs to not get to him very quickly if he wants to win the title.
Very true. And I don't know. I think, well, I know DD, Kyle and I, we talked about it. I think this race will determine if it's like a physical or a mental overcoming that he has to do. I actually think it's mental. I think he's realizing that like they said there was no number one, but they didn't mean it. There is a true number one, and they just don't want to say it. And now he's kind of being left out there to dry. And I hate it for him. I want him to win it and then immediately go to like someone else.
Yeah, anyone else. But again, I think also for McLaren and Oscar specifically, he is learning what it is like to be the guy with the target. And Max has had the
Mhm.
target even last year, right? Max had the target the entire season. Max has had the target for basically 4 years since he's won all four. I sorry, 3 years, because in 2021, that didn't count because he didn't win that one. But 2022, 23, 24, the target was clearly on his back and he was able to excel. And even if he had pressure, it was neutralized by the fact that Red Bull has a system where three other drivers on the grid can help
Yeah.
him out at a moment's notice. This time around, Oscar is in a position, like even last year, they were chasing Red Bull in the constructors the entire year until they passed. And even then, they had to hold off Ferrari in the last couple of races to win it. This year, the target has been clearly on their back all year as a constructor team. But for Oscar, he's been leading this drivers race since what?
The
Early May?
second, the third race or something like that.
Yeah, like I mean, he was like where it was a considerable lead. I think it was like into April, early May, where you look back, you go, man, Oscar has blown this thing kind of wide open, and so he has the new job of having all the targets pointed at him. And when he turns to his left and turns to his right, there's nobody there to help him, not even his team. And I think that is where he's starting to wilt a little bit under that pressure. And it's understandable because he's had to withstand it for so long. But I know that he does not want to go through this offseason and in future years with the regret of having led this thing the entire time. And then that pressure being the reason why either his own teammate or even Max Verstappen comes back and wins this thing.
Yeah. I I do 100% agree with what you're saying of like he wanted it, but he also expected to have the support around him to be able to go want it and get it because he wanted it. He went and got it, and he's holding on. But you could like you said, there's been a lot of mistakes he's made in the last couple of races, and I truly feel for him because it's not it doesn't all fall on him. They are
Mhm.
truly letting him down, and I don't know if he has come to accept that because I think that's where all the mistakes are coming in. And then your pit crew just being absolute garbage and not
Yeah.
holding, like not helping you get under, like have a good pit stop at all. It's crazy. So,
And that changes the strategy for
yeah.
both of them, but really for him because again, he knows that he's being chased and he knows that every one of those, hundredths of a second count. And when they're not giving it to him, I know he's in that car feeling some sort of way about like, yo, these guys, they don't care about me. They don't necessarily, they may care about the constructors, but when it comes to the drivers' championship, they don't care. And every other team where you have one person in first and the other driver is behind, you may have a racing situation like Mercedes with Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, but there was a clear like, okay, he's in first, so he's the priority. Okay, this other guy's taking over. He's in first now. Okay, the priority is shifted, but there's no like, oh, this guy's in first, but this other guy, we really need him to be in the race too, so we're going to do everything to help out the guy that's in second. That's never happened, right? And so that's where I'm sure he's feeling some kind of way in this drive, but he has to get the professionalism of his. He has to escape that funk very quickly because if he doesn't, he's going to be left with regret, and that is going to be worse than any pressure that he may feel right now.
That's true.
So let's take a quick break because we still have our predictions to do. So we will be right back with our podium prediction and our constructor scrap. Okay, we are back. We turn our attention to what we think is going to happen this weekend. And we start with our podium prediction. Of course, we're going first, second, and third. Ebony, I turn to you. Who is
Okay.
your podium for this week?
Um, I'm gonna go Max at one. I want to put a Ferrari at two. I just don't know which one. Yeah, I want to put George at two, and then hopefully Oscar gets on the bounce back and put Oscar at three.
Interesting. So I had a similar thought process as you, but here's who I went. I went with Max winning it because, again, I feel like he's gonna enter cyborg mode and do that. I have Charles going second, and I have George coming in third. The reason why is I think that there's going to be a moment where two guys, namely Charles and George, are the McLarens are going to get distracted and they'll be able to skirt on by. And I think the chaos part of it is that Max being in first and the two McLarens not being on the podium really tightens this thing up. And I
Mhm.
think that's what we're both kind of deep down maybe looking for to make this something to talk about over the next couple of weeks.
To be
Let's
fair,
yeah.
that third, it can easily go to Charles.
Oh
So
yeah.
it could easily. So that's why I'm like, I want to have more faith in Oscar for this week because it's just been not good for him. But I could easily see the Ferrari jumping him. Um, because to borrow a phrase from Andre, they hooping. And that last the Coda was a great race for Ferrari.
hmm
Like I don't know what got into them, but it was a really good race for them.
I mean, the last couple of weeks, you've seen them start to, put some of the ills from earlier in the season behind them, and yeah, it feels like they have a renewed vigor to try and close out the season. I'm not going to be surprised at all if one of them, or even both, actually end up on the podium. I think right now, Charles will be there, and Lewis will somehow be in the mix.
Yeah.
Let's turn to the constructor scrap, most and least points. We obviously cannot choose McLaren, even though they've wrapped up the Constructors' Championship, and we can't choose Ebony's team, Alpine, for least points. So, Ebony, who do you got?
Um, this kind of leads into my fear of like the number one, like the number three spot could go to like Charles. Um, so I think the Ferrari is gonna have a really good weekend. If he's not number three and Lewis is not number five, then it's gonna be up there, like in those spots. So, and I don't think, regardless, I don't think Yuki or Kimi helps with points for their respective teams. So the only points that'll happen will be from Max and George for Red Bull and Mercedes. But they won't have the least points. That'll definitely be Williams.
Ooh, interesting. So I was in your thought process with the most points. I had Ferrari because I feel like both of them are going to be in the top five,
Yeah.
as opposed to Red Bull or Mercedes, where one may be on the podium, the other might be a little bit further down in the classification. But for least points, I have Racing Bulls because I think one of them is going to try and cause a wreck to help Max, and the other is going to like be, something's going to happen. They're going to be down further in the back of the grid, and Max is going to need him to hold off the rest of McLaren as he laps them. So he's going to be like, "Yo, let me sacrifice some positioning here to hold off the McLarens whenever they get to me." Lap 60 or so when they're lapping them. So I have Racing Bulls. No disrespect to Isaac Hadjar. I think he's been doing well, and honestly, one of them could feature well in qualifying. But I feel like Red Bull hierarchy is going to start to show its face this weekend. Uh, dare I say, in a good way this time. I hate that Max is kind of, you know, shedded some of his heel that he's had over the last 4 years, but
Yeah.
I kind of see it.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, Kick was also a good one because it's never both. It's always just Nico or nothing.
Hmm.
So that would have also been a good shout. But
We will see. Yeah, I think one of them is going to do bad. Sometimes there's a surprise always in the top 10 and sometimes in the top five, and I don't know who it is, which is why I didn't pick Sauber for that. But let's talk about some of the times real quick as we wrap up here.
Mhm.
All the times for the different practices, qualification, qualifying, and the Grand Prix. Free practice one starts on Friday. That will be at 2:25 p.m. Eastern time on ESPNU, ESPN Deportes, and ESPN Plus. Free practice two will be on Friday at 5:55 p.m. That will be on ESPN News, Deportes, and ESPN Plus. We switch to Saturday. Free practice three will be at 1:25 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN News, Deportes, and ESPN Plus. And then you have qualifying on Saturday, 4:55 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN News, ESPN Deportes, and ESPN Plus. And then finally, the Mexico City Grand Prix on Sunday, 3:55 p.m. Eastern time. It will be on ABC, so network TV, ladies and gentlemen. So find your antennas, get them now. ABC, ESPN Deportes, and ESPN Plus. If you don't get to the race live, they will have a replay at 9 p.m. on Sunday night on ESPN2, also on ESPN Plus whenever you find the time to watch it. That will do it. We will be back, obviously, after the weekend to recap Mexico City. It's the last race before we have another break. We have a break between Mexico City and Brazil. So we have promised you the 2026 regulations episode. I promise you it will come at some point. Hopefully we will get to it next week, but we will recap this race after the weekend's done. That will do it for this episode. And for Ebony, I am Donald. I say to you all, vroom vroom.
Vroom, vroom.